Okay, the topic of this lecture is theory in healthcare ethics. Before we start talking about theory, I want to talk a little bit about why ethics in the first place. Then we have rules and laws, and we can just follow those, and they will always tell us what the right thing to do is. Well, there are reasons why we need a grounding in ethics. Uh, for one thing, in all areas of healthcare, there'll be tough decisions that you'll have to make at various levels, whether it's at the ground level in the clinic or at an administrative level in terms of personnel or at levels of organization and structure and other kinds of decisions. And in your personal life, you'll have to make tough decisions when it comes with healthcare, such as caring for an elderly parent or something like that. And secondly, a lot of times the obvious choice is not obvious what you should do. And so the law or the rules of your organization doesn't tell you exactly what you should do. So you have to uh, rely on more than just that. You have to reason through and use ethical thinking to try to decide what the right thing to do is, because ethics is really all about doing the right thing. And sometimes you might be on a committee with more than one person and people have different views and different opinions about what the right thing to do is. And if you're able to communicate why you think your position is the correct one, or be able to understand their position, why they think theirs is the correct one, you can have a much more constructive argument. Understanding the foundations for ethics and the terminology we use in ethics can help you make those kind of decisions and convince people or perhaps be convinced by them. So the authors of our text use an analogy of a toolbox. This is not a course on ethical theory, so we're not going to delve deep into that. And in fact, I just have you skim a lot of the parts of this chapter just to get the idea. But they will be there. We'll be using principles and relying on them, which is our second half of this lesson, more than these theories. But I did want to touch on them since they are very well known in the history of ethics and in biomedical ethics and healthcare ethics. So, theories are just really alternative views on what is most important. Some are very well developed, some are ancient, some are more modern, but really all they are is some philosopher or group of people at some point said, okay, this is the most important thing, so we'll base our ethics on this. And then the thing got a name and continued on after that. And they're part of this toolbox that we have, and they can guide our decision making, help us decide what to do, and help us convince others when we don't have direction from the rules and the laws. And sometimes the rules and laws seem unethical and look like they need to be changed, and that happens quite a lot. So the major theories, just really briefly, just tell you the name of it and briefly what it's about. So they're authority-based theories in which right and wrong is determined by some authority figure. A lot of major religions think in this term, like, well, this is what our God said, or this is what our founder said. You may have an authority figure who's a political figure and say, well, this is what the founder of our community or founder of our country said we should do. There's natural law theory, which is the dominant ethical theory of the Catholic Church, although it predates that. And the idea is that there is a natural order to things, and for the church it's ordained by God, and that's what determines what right and wrong is, so that we should act in accordance with the natural law. There's so-called teleological theories, which say that what is right and wrong is determined by the consequences of the decision. Whatever we decide to do, if it promotes the most happiness or the most well-being for everyone affected, then it's the right thing to do. If it doesn't do that, then it's the wrong thing to do compared to whatever the alternative actions are. There are so-called deontological theories. It comes from a word deon, which means duty. And the idea is that right and wrong is determined by what one's duty is. Now you have to determine what your duty is. Maybe your duty is to follow certain kinds of rules of some kind. You may think of this in particular in regards to the military, but there's an idea that one has an ethical duty in some way to, say, refrain from harm or benefit people. There's what's called virtue ethics, and this ties into the idea of character. Virtues are considered to be traits of character like courage or mercy or things like that, and that we should follow the role model of a virtuous person, someone, say, from history or even from our personal life, who we think is a person who tends to do the right thing, and we should exemplify their behavior. And finally, egoistic theories. Now, there's some argument about whether these are actually ethical theories. It's really all that determines what's right and wrong is what's in one's self-interest. And a lot of people think ethics has to go beyond an individual's self-interest, although this has been a theory that has been promoted. The authors argue that in the text that in healthcare, since your primary mission is to help others, that you really can't be determining right and wrong based on what's in your self-interest all the time. So hopefully all these terms and ideas won't have you going OMG. It's really just supposed to be part of the toolbox. Refer to it as we need. These are the uses of ethical theories. Again, you may want to convince someone. Someone may think that following a certain authority figure is the correct thing to do, while someone else may think that the consequences of the decision are more important. Then maybe you have to figure out, okay, that's why they are reasoning that way. I need to figure out how to argue on their terms to convince them to do something different if you think that something different is the right thing to do. So you may introduce another ethical theory or try to use the one that they're using. And the limits, of course, are that a lot of times in situations, these things are not going to tell us exactly what the right thing to do is. And through our own reasoning and working with others, we're going to really figure out what the right thing to do is if it's a very tough decision. So, as we said, tough decisions have to be made. And the more tools we have, the more concepts, the more ideas we understand to be able to talk with people, to be able to decide better, the better off all of us will be. End of lecture. Cheers.